programming today. Perfect. We remembered to record. That's important. Yeah, so before we jump into our programming today, I wanted to also just acknowledge the heaviness that many of us are feeling today, whether that's heaviness caused by our different climate crises that we're experiencing, the different forms of violence we are witnessing and experiencing in and to our communities, and any other personal burdens we are carrying. So I'm going to ask us all to take 10 seconds to take in a collective breath just to ground us. Feel free to close your eyes, relax your body in your space, and breathe in. And out. Thank y'all. And now I will ask Erica to introduce Dena.
Thanks, Emily, for setting up the space so beautifully. And today I'm really excited to introduce Dena. Dena Igusti is a queer, non-binary Indonesian Muslim poet, playwright, filmmaker, producer, and FGC survivor and activist, born and raised in Queens, New York. They are the author of Cut Woman, which has been listed as a 2022 Perennial Award winner and 2020 Harvard Bookstore staff pick, and an Entropy Mag's Best of 2020 to 2021. And I Need This Not to Swallow Me Alive. They are the co-playwright of The Wish, a manual for a last-ditch effort to save abortion in the United States through theater. They are also the founder of Dearest Mirrors. Their work has been featured in Boat Press, Peregrine Journal, Color Block, and several other publications. Their work has been produced and performed at the Brooklyn Museum, the Apollo Theater, Women Deliver, the 2018 Teen Vogue Summit, Players Theater, Prelude Festival, Center at West Park, The Tank, and several other venues internationally. We are so lucky to have them here today, and just excited to have them here. So without further ado, here's Dena.
Thank you so much, Erica, for having me, and thank you to AAPI Women Lead for having me. Hi, my name is Dena, as mentioned before, and thank you again for taking time, especially in the midst of everything that's going on, to be a part of this. So we are going to get started a little bit. Right now, we're just going to talk about declarations of existence. What exactly does that mean? What exactly does that pertain to? And how do we kind of declare ourselves in that facet? Just to keep in mind that, like, this, even though this is a virtual space, I want everyone to be as comfortable as possible. So feel free to turn off your cameras, feel free to kind of step out whenever you need to. There may or may not be discussions of xenophobia, racism, police brutality, things in regards to physical and mental health. So if you need to take a step back, feel free to do so. Or if you need to take a step back whenever, for whatever reason, go for it. We'll also take a bio break at some point midway through, if that also helps. So yeah, what exactly are we doing? And what are we doing within this hour and 15 minutes? We're going to talk about declarations of existence. So declarations in this country, usually in the form of policy, manifesto, etc., have largely been branded and claimed by people who hurt other people, and oftentimes are used as an explanation or justification for harm. As marginalized people, we are constantly forced to exclaim what we are not in an attempt to move away from said harm, whether it's, oh, I am not like this, I am not this stereotype, I am not related to certain forms of extremism or terrorism, et cetera, et cetera. In this workshop, we're going to not only talk about who we are and what we actually are, but also how we exist within what is passed down to us, what we survive and what brings us joy, whether that be our histories, community, identity, and more. Rather than minimize ourselves, our stories, and our hopes, we're going to instead focus on declarations of existence. So I claim my right to thrive and control my own life and body. I want that for others, and this is how I think we can make that happen. While I go over the goals, feel free, we're going to be writing a little bit, or kind of a lot for this, so feel free if you want to use the chat box, if you want to use pen and paper, if you want to use your computer, whatever kind of feels comfortable. But what we are aiming to do for this workshop is, 1, to reimagine what is possible in naming our presence, 2, to recognize, energize, and share the ideals, hopes, and concerns we hold in this moment, and 3, to put words to these ideals, hopes, and concerns, to foster the communication of them amongst ourselves. Okay, so we're gonna start writing pretty soon. This is gonna be a very, very small warm-up. This is just kind of to get used to just writing about ourselves in particular ways, because I think oftentimes, for me, I know it can be very jarring to write about myself. So this is kind of a way to like get into the groove of it. So for the next 3 minutes, I want you to kind of answer as many of these lists as possible. Don't think about it. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're not going to be sharing this part. It's really just a warm up. So some of them are 3 people you remember from high school, your 2 go-to vending machine snacks, 3 mythical creatures, 5 creatures that live in the sea, 3 states you've never been to, your coffee, tea, juice order, 3 fruits, 2 crafts you want to learn, 5 countries you hope to visit, and or 3 bodies of water. So yeah, feel free. I will start the timer starting now. And feel free to write whatever, and I'll also be doing it alongside her. So yeah. All right, 1 more minute. Okay, we can start wrapping up our list in 3, 2, 1. Feel free to kind of jot down the last thing that you need to write, letter, line, little flick, whatever works. Okay, so first, I think I want to talk a little bit about how we often declare ourselves day to day. I think the idea of declarations of existence tends to sound very big and like very, very daunting in a lot of facets, in that like it always usually is something like it comes off as a lot more grand. But I think oftentimes it is important to note that we usually declare ourselves day to day in certain facets. And how do we often distinguish ourselves from one another? How do we distinguish our existence? The first thing is obviously names when it comes to kind of introductions, like, hi, my name is Dena Igusti. Hi, my name is et cetera, et cetera. Oftentimes when we consider the act of the name, how we kind of navigate how we name ourselves. Obviously, there's a name that we are given, there's a name that we've chosen for ourselves, but also sometimes there are facets in terms of whether or not it is because of the limitations of the English language, or there are certain facets of having to kind of censor or make our names palatable. We navigate pronunciations or other aspects of our naming. For instance, like my name is Dena, but usually I'm like, hey, like you can call me Dena if that's okay, whatever's easier for you. Or something for me where like Dena is a shorthand for a much longer name, and I do not name myself that because for me, I've kind of conditioned myself to be kind of more palatable in that sense. Country of origin is also often how we declare ourselves. I think especially as marginalized folks, but especially particularly as Asian folks, we are constantly asked where we're from, where we're really from, quote unquote, where our families are from. And as a result of that, how we're perceived and like how we kind of have a relationship to country of origin, whatever origin means, is also something that we have to navigate whenever we declare ourselves. Other aspects also include gender, as well as location. Gender, I think, especially with how you navigate life, how like you are often treated based on how you declare yourself within the context of gender, especially if you are non-binary or a woman, is something that is constantly a battle in terms of there's this aspect of how you're perceived, but also there's the other like side of like what you are okay with declaring in proximity to said gender. And location also in terms of, yeah, like where you're from, but also how did you get here? Where did you live? There's a lot of aspects that also kind of factor into that, right? So to kind of move away a little bit from kind of our day-to-day forms of declaring ourselves, which often can have certain limitations, we are going to do this first prompt, which is basically in 3 to 5 sentences, introduce yourself, but don't use any names, including your own name. So for me, instead of saying my name is Dena, I am going to say, my name is a shorthand for center of the universe. My name is born out of a child born from 36 hours of labor and the final sun rays through an Elmhurst hospital window. Or say, instead of saying that I'm from Queens, I say I am from 50-cent sodas and dollar pizzas on every street corner. So we will do that for about 5 minutes. And yeah, feel free to conjure up whatever feels right. You don't have to limit yourself to the previous iterations of those declarations, but yeah, feel free to introduce yourself, just not using just the aspect of the name itself. So I will start the timer in 3, 2, 1, go. Waiting 2 more minutes. One more minute. And let me know if you need more time in the chat. Alrighty, you can start wrapping up. Feel free to wrap up your last line, word, punctuation mark in 3, 2, 1. Okay, awesome. Thank you for indulging me in doing this first prompt. If you would like to share some of it in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and share it, whatever you wrote, feel free to, or even talk a little bit about the process of what it was like to not be able to use your name. For me, whenever I kind of do this, it tends to be a little bit daunting because I think because I'm not relying so much on the name, I often have to lean into my experience or what my day-to-day kind of looks like or what I have to internally navigate. So going back to kind of the examples, I feel it's way more vulnerable to talk about how the meaning of my name, and also kind of the process of how I was named, rather than kind of just sticking with my little 4-letter name, Dena, right? And even when it comes to talking about Queens, as someone who's very prideful about being born and raised in Queens, I think sometimes there's this like notion of like, oh yeah, because I'm from New York City, I'm from this borough, like, of course you'll know what it is. It's easy to kind of like know what it means to say what I'm from. But when I can't use that name, I have to kind of dive heavier into my experience, what my day-to-day living in Queens was like, and kind of tapping into certain imagery. So it's like sonically, what am I navigating? Visually, what do I have to navigate? Audio-wise, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's kind of like my experience whenever I do these things. And again, feel free to share, but also totally not. There's been a lot of things that have been happening.
This is Tabitha. Can I share?
Of course, yeah, go for it.
I'm just like surprised by what I wrote, so I just wanted to share it.
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm a female out of my origin, but in my element. I am of mountainous ranges and high desert atmospheres. I'm living, my eyes and hair are dark and almond, as if I don't belong here, but yet I am familiar. I'm living a life less noticed, but nonetheless. That's it, thanks.
Thank you for sharing that, Tabitha. And that was absolutely beautiful. I love how you not only are kind of leaning into like those sensory aspects of like talking about like how you describe yourself, your hairs, your eyes, but also leaning into your feelings over how you feel about kind of how you exist physically. That concept of whether or not like you kind of are here but not necessarily belong. Allowing yourself uncertainty. And I think that's also something that's very important to note, is that like oftentimes there's this expectation that we have to be sure of what we are, who we are, what we need to be, where we're from, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't have to be all the time. I think especially given our histories, given the ways in which we've had to navigate the world, it's complicated. And also you're not always going to be sure all the time. And that's totally fine. So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Tabitha. Anyone else? Also totally fine if not.
I'd like to share.
Yeah, please.
Hi everyone. So what I ended up writing is, my name is born out of a nun's mouth, combining two different names as one, after a woman who cleansed the foot of a man that was crucified on a wooden cross. I am from a tropical island, born quake with a fellow being inside a mother's womb, sharing two babies sharing one placenta in one womb. And I am from the suburbs of a metropolitan city that is part of 7,000 plus or minus islands, depending on the seawater level. This was fun.
I'm glad. I was also gonna be like, your name's born out of a nun's mouth. Oh my God, I was fire. But also in all seriousness, like it's also beautiful over how like when it came to talking about your name, like what that process is. What are the kind of the generations like before you, and like what are the things that kind of have come before you were born, and also acknowledging that like that makes up so much of your existence, whether you're aware of it or not. I love all like the aspects, like whether it's like the climate aspects of like how you describe like where you're from, like not only in terms of metropolitan, but also depending on the rain level. Like it kind of like just gives this like rhythm to like where you're from and like where you're located. And like it's honestly gorgeous. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anybody else? Again, totally fine if not. I'm just gonna do like a going once, going twice. Yeah, thank you for sharing, and thank you so much for again just doing this with me and being a part of this. Alrighty, so we are going to do a little rapid fire. And then this is kind of just more so talking about like how we exist, not only within ourselves, but also how do we exist in relation to other people? Because I think that's something that also like is something that we have to constantly acknowledge as well. For me, I always have to kind of navigate like how I also like exist and like how I perceive myself, because I'm constantly thinking about how my family like feels about it, how I am. I'm very aware of like, I am my mother's daughter. So how I carry myself often comes with a certain self-consciousness in that facet. So yeah, this is kind of like a little prompt to talk about that, to kind of interrogate that a little bit. So we're gonna do like a cute little rapid fire of like 1 minute each list. So similar to the initial warm up, where just don't think, just write. So the first one will be, and I'll like keep going in terms of like one by one, but things that you've inherited from your family, things that you've learned from your friends, what has been passed down to you from your community, whether it's school, neighborhood, etc., and what has been passed down to you from your identity, whatever that looks like for you. Okay, so we're going to start with the first one. List things that you have inherited from your family. Again, 1 minute rapid fire, and I'm going to start it in 3, 2, 1, go. Alrighty, start wrapping that up in 3, 2, 1. All right, take a deep breath in. Take a deep breath out. And now we're going to go to the next prompt, which is list what you learned from your friends at any point in your life. They do not have to be your friends now. They can be friends that you want, people that like you want to be friends, whatever friends look like for you, and whatever learning looks like from you. And I will start this in 3, 2, 1, go. Alrighty, start wrapping up your last word and phrase in 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're gonna do another deep breath in, deep breath out. Next one is what has been passed down to you from your community, whatever community looks like, school, neighborhood, your family that's also not your family, or like the group of people from your church or mosque that like are not related to you, but you know, they feel like your cousins. It can be any of those things. So we can start that in 3, 2, 1. Ready, as usual, wrap up the last word, sentence, punctuation mark. We're going to do one more breath work of breathing in and breathing out. And the last one is what has been passed down to you from your identity, whatever that means. It could be race, gender, socioeconomic class, other facets. And we will start that again in 3, 2, 1. Alrighty, we can wrap up that list. Same as usual, punctuation mark, word in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Throughout all of this, in the back of your head, you don't necessarily have to share it. But think about if there were any similarities or differences amongst these lists. Were there some traits that were exclusive to each group? And this is kind of important to keep in mind for the next prompt that we will be doing. So for the next 5 minutes, I want you to circle one of these traits and write about how you feel about said trait. How is it passed down to you? What is your relationship to it now? What do you want to do with said trait in this moment in time? So keep in mind all those things. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you're comfortable with it, we may share some of it in a bit. But for now, yeah, just ponder within the 5 minutes and write for the next 5 minutes in 3, 2, 1. Few more minutes. One more minute. All right, start wrapping up the last word, phrase, punctuation mark in 3, 2, 1. All right, I hope that felt okay. If it didn't, totally understandable and totally fine. And if anyone wants to share or type anything in the chat, it can be either just a trait or how you felt about kind of your relationship with that trait. Feel free to do so and feel free to unmute yourself. I'll go first a little bit. For me, I talked a lot about fighting. I learned how to fight for my friends, and I learned how to fight in my middle school. And it was just straight up fighting in a locked girls' bathroom every week or every other week. By no means am I glorifying violence, but it was a way for me to learn early on how to take care of my friends, whether it was a thing where like someone was arguing with someone else and like, they needed support, or also how to be accountable and show up for my friends, and not relying on just because I have a friendship with them, that means that I can kind of just do whatever and act however I wanted under the guise of, oh, we're friends, they'll know what I mean. So again, not glorifying bathroom fights, but it was something that has still held dear to me. The act of kind of going at it in particular ways, that cathartic like aspect of it. Yeah. So I think in that way, I've learned, and the trait of like being able to fight has something that has still held dear to me now, and not because I can throw a punch. But yeah. So if anyone else wants to share, that's great. It could even just be, again, it could be just the trait itself, but if not, totally cool, totally fine. Yeah. Going once. Going twice. Also, again, feel free to kind of just stew in it and sit with it. This is very personal. This is very particular. And again, more than understandable. Fearlessness, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. I think like when we, especially fearlessness from immigrant parents, I think like the concept of like making yourself known and making yourself like show up in a place that like you may or may not know, but also it's a thing where like you were surrounded by people who just because of coincidence were just born out of place, feel as though they have a right to act or say however to you, is tough to navigate. And like having that fearlessness is so important, and I'm glad that was passed on to you. Mine was a fear of getting tanned from my grandma and ramifications of colorism being put on a child. Absolutely. And also same. I think like that colorism is often it is heavily prevalent. It is also just like very gross. It's also, I think, very painful a lot of times, or I don't want to speak for your experience by any means, but like, I think like the ways in which it is often normalized and like kind of entrenched, whether it's like, don't go out in the sun, or like you'll get tan, or, oh, like you look really like tan right now in this like facet, like it's so normalized particular ways that like it's normalized particular ways where it's like you can't help but like kind of internalize that in certain facets. So thank you for sharing that. Generational trauma, but also generational resilience. Absolutely. Again, it's this other facet of like having to navigate that there are so many things that have happened before you, and after, by some certain regard, you kind of have to live with it. And that can be painful, that can be daunting, but also like there are aspects of it that kind of like can be positive and like can be almost reclaimed in particular ways. Does anybody else want to share? Again, totally fine, totally personal. Cool. Thank you for sharing with me, and thank you for indulging me in this. Before we kind of get into the last part of this, or before we go into the actual writing of decorations, I think it's fair to take a little break, a little 5-minute break. It's 8:25 now. We can come back at 8:30 if that works for everyone. So yeah, I'll see you all back at 8:30. I'll just give 1 quick minute for people to kind of like slowly come back. And then we will get started. again, I also realized that I kept saying 8:30, this, that, and the third, as if everyone is on East Coast time, and I truly apologize. Okay, so we're going to go into the actual writing of our declarations of existence. But before we kind of go into that, yeah, I'm just double checking. But this does not have to be perfect. This does not have to be coherent. Just write a declaration. We're going to set a timer for 5 minutes. We're just going to write a declaration of whatever. It doesn't have to be, it can be based on any of the prompts that we've used earlier. It can also just be about things that you like. It can be about like things that you're not too fond of. It can be about your favorite food. It can be about identity. It can be about your opinion, your very strong opinion on music. It literally can be anything. So within the 5 minutes, let's kind of just do that and write a declaration. It can be literally anything. It does not have to be coherent. And we won't be sharing this part. So yeah, feel free to write whatever makes you feel comfortable. In 3, 2, 1, go. Alrighty, one more minute. Righty, you can start wrapping up your last word, phrase, punctuation mark, line in 3, 2, 1. Alrighty. Thank you again for taking the time to do it. Thank you for using these 5 minutes to kind of start dropping those aspects of declaration. I'm going to kind of pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action by Audre Lorde. For those who already know or don't know, Audre Lorde was a writer and activist who talks a lot about like various aspects of language. So I kind of wanted to share a little bit of this quote in particular. This was shortly after she mentions being diagnosed with a possibly malignant tumor in her breast. It ended up being benign at the time, but it did prompt a number of questions and reflections. So I'm going to read it out. And becoming forcibly and essentially aware of my mortality and of what I wished and wanted for my life, however short it might be, priorities and omissions became strongly etched in a merciless light. And what I most regretted were my silences. Of what had I ever been afraid? To question or to speak as I believed could have meant pain or death. But we all hurt in so many different ways, all the time, and pain will either change or end. Death, on the other hand, is the final silence, and that might be coming quickly now, without regard for whether I had ever spoken what needed to be said, or had only betrayed myself into small silences, while I planned someday to speak or waited for someone else's words. So with that in mind, what are the words you do not yet have? What do you need to say? What are the tyrannies you swallow day by day and attempt to make your own? So I kind of want to share that quote because I think oftentimes, especially in the context of Audre Lorde, there is usually associations with her are often very powerful, which is great. But I also kind of just love this quote because she is very vulnerable in what it means to kind of like put ourselves and like put language into our experiences, especially in this facet. I think oftentimes we are not allowed to say what we are and claim how we exist unless we're doing something great. If whether it means we have to be successful in some facet and under this capitalist guise of having a degree, job, money, etc., or like we've done something that like is respectable, whatever that means, to make people proud, or other facets. And I think as a result of that, whenever we don't fit whatever threshold whether that we put on ourselves or other people put on us, we feel like we don't have the right to say who we are and kind of give language of our experience and kind of just who we are and frankly exist. But I think this quote I love so much because it kind of undoes it in a particular sense, and that I don't have to be this grandiose person in order to have my right to exist and also talk about my right to exist, right? I don't have to fit a certain framework. I don't have to undergo some type of trauma in order to have my voice out in particular ways. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to declarations of existence or any type of declaration, it really is just evidence that we are here and we are alive and we exist. And that should always be more than enough. Okay, so with kind of that in mind-ish, and it kind of wrapping up this whole workshop, and thank you again for doing this with me. For the next 15 minutes, draft a more thorough declaration. It can be a more crystallized version of what you wrote previously or something entirely new. So we will be doing that right now. And again, it can be from what you wrote prior, it can be from previous prompts, it can be something completely new. And like, while like this might be a little bit more polished, it doesn't have to be perfect. Also at the same time, it doesn't have to be coherent at all. Whatever makes you feel good. So I'm going to put a little timer and we can start in 3, 2, 1. 6 more minutes. Two more minutes. one more minute. All right. Take this last moment to wrap up your last word, sentence, phrase, punctuation mark, all of that jazz. Yeah. Okay. So kind of want to do a quick little breath work again. Breathe in and then breathe out. Okay. How did that feel? And also overall, like, how did it feel to put language in what you want to do and talk about the things that you care about? If you would like to share, that would be great. It doesn't have to be everything. It could be a couple of sentences. If you want to just talk more about the process, that's also more than fine. Or if you don't want to share at all, also more than fine. Doing this is deeply personal, and that is more than understandable. For me, oftentimes when I've had to do these declarations, sometimes it can feel good. Sometimes it has felt a little bit daunting. And sometimes it's a thing where I'm very aware of what has come before me, and that can be very painful at times. I've noticed that a lot of my declarations tend to center around grief and being aware that someone has passed and now I'm here. And sometimes what that means can mean resilience, but also sometimes for me that has often brought in like certain guilt. And I think that's fair to have both at once, and it's fair for both feelings to kind of exist at once in those things. And thank you, Christy. Thank you for creating this space to process. Thank you so much, Christy, for being a part of it. But yeah, does anyone have any thoughts? If not, again, totally cool. We can wrap this up. We can save some time if we want to. And yeah, going once, going twice. Amazing. Thank you so much, Jane, for being a part of it. And thank you everyone for being a part of this. Yeah, thank you again for being a part of this. Thank you for AAPI Women's League for letting me do this little workshop and talk about existence. If you ever have any questions for me, I'm also a writer and do a bunch of other stuff. And if you have writing questions, my email is here. And here's my IG, and there's also my website if you would like. I'm just going to do a little thing. Maybe I felt like having a deep and good conversation with best friends, but this time with myself, it made me realize things I wasn't aware. Appreciate the wisdom and the workshop. Thank you so much for being a part of it. And yeah, it's also great in that like these declarations could just be like a good check-in with yourself. And like that is more than fine. But yeah, thanks everyone.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dena. And thank you to everyone else for also just like being here and being in this space. As we kind of slowly wrap up, I just have a few logistical things to go over. So yeah, thank you again to Dena. This is our first storytelling workshop. And I honestly can't think of like a more perfect workshop or person to facilitate this. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, other things before we go, please feel free to keep in touch with our organization. through our Instagram, and then also our newsletter. I can drop our Instagram handle and our website information down below in a second. I also know that for our virtual events, we like to close out with a group picture. If you are comfortable doing so, please feel free to come on camera if you'd like. If you would rather not be on camera, please feel free to stay off camera. But I'll hand it over to Emily to take, our comms person, to take the quick group photo, if that's okay. Emily, I can't hear you unless that's just me. Try again. Take your time. There is no rush. Still no audio. Sorry for putting you on the spot. In the meantime, I will actually put our Instagram info in the chat. Our Instagram handle is the same on like Twitter. We're not very active on Twitter though, but same on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, all those platforms. And then our website is org. On that site, you can check out our newsletter where we announce like events and things like that to stay up to date. And then we also launched our community healing and wellness hub on there that has a bunch of digital resources and everything. So yeah, please feel free to check that out as needed. I think Emily is joining soon, so we'll just make sure they're ready.
Hello, can you? I am so sorry. I literally don't know what happened. I think my computer exploded for like 5 seconds, but okay. So I'm gonna take our group picture really quick. So on the count of 3, everybody big smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay, wait, hold on. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, everyone. Hope to see you at our next event. Thank you.